See, the field of taxonomy that deals with characterization, naming, and classification of organisms. So when we identify an organism, we identify it up to its species level. So what is a species? If we answer this aspect, then that becomes the subject of a species concept. People have defined species their own way, and through this video I want to discuss that what is a species and what definition people have given regarding species and which one is the most appropriate one. So let us have concept about a species. A species is a group of related organisms, that all those organisms which belong to a species, they are genetically related to each other. So they are group of individuals which are related and they share a common characteristics. Morphologically or genetically they will be sharing common aspects, means they will be very related to each other, and they are capable to interbreed among themselves. This is very important point, that they can mate with each other and they are capable to produce fertile offspring. So this forms the real definition of a species, that is individuals which have common characteristics, which breed among themselves and produce fertile offspring. They form a species. So members of a species share a common gene pool, and it is lowest taxonomic category. When we classify an organism, we classify it under phylum, then class, family, maybe genus, species. So the lowest taxonomic category, that becomes the species. Some species may be further categorized as subspecies, but species is actually the smallest unit of classification. That is why it becomes important. So what is a species concept? Actually, when we talk about a species concept, we simply want to explain what is a species. We want to actually define a species. Now, since so many people, they have given definition of a species their own way, then all such aspects, all such definitions we should know. Now, it was Darwin who wrote a book on the origin of a species by natural selection. This is actually the title of that book, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. This book was published in 1859, and in this book he dealt issues regarding the ways by which new species are created, new species are formed. Means he talked about speciation, how species are created. That becomes a separate aspect. But before that, people wanted to know that what is a species. So let us see the different opinions which have been put forward, and that is known as species concept. There are more than 20 different species concepts. So many people, they have defined species their own way. Some people considered ecological aspect of it, some considered biological aspects of a species, certain people considered morphological features. So a number of definitions or explanations are available, but out of all those, 4 are of much significance or importance. They have been given more emphasis. So let us see these 4. The first one is typological species concept. Second one is nominalistic species concept. Third one, biological species concept, and the fourth, evolutionary species concept. So these are 4 major or principal species concept. Let us see the first one, that is typological species concept. This particular concept is also known as essentialist species concept, or people also call it phenetic concept because it deals with phenotype. Phenotype means external appearance of organisms. It is also called as morphological species concept. So see, it is known by four different terms, that is typological or essentialist or phenetic or morphological species concept. Now, why it is called as a species concept? Because, why it is called as typological species concept? Because every species is considered as a type, and a particular species will be identified by its certain, specific features. So that will be considered as a type. Like uh, we use the term type study of an organism. It means we want to study a specific kind of specimen. So type that represent a specific type. So typological species concept is based on morphology or phenotype of individuals. And it was Aristotle and Plato, these two philosophers, they actually dealt this aspect through their philosophies. They considered that every species will have a specific, morphological characteristic, and that will form the basis of its identification. So group of individuals which have common morphological features, they form a species. This is the real definition of a species. If we consider the typological species concept, then this is the real meaning of it, that is group of individuals which share common morphological characteristics, they form a species. Now, there is a finite number of varieties of living organism that exist on Earth. It means on this planet, the number of species, whether of plants or animals or any other organism, that is fixed. So no variation is going to take place. Means a species is a fixed, characteristic. It is not going to change further. This was actually a drawback because we know that a species will go on accumulating changes in its morphology as well as in its genetic characteristic. But according to this typological or morphological species concept, the number of species present on this planet are fixed. Then these types do not exhibit any relationship with each other. It means all those types which exist on this planet, they are totally different from each other. They are individual, as if they were found at one point of time, and as such they are remaining on this planet, and they are not related to each other. This was another concept, that these types do not exhibit any relationship with each other. It means evolutionarily they are not related. This was also a drawback in considering the species. Now, Kane in 1954 regarded it as morphospecies, that is, individuals which are morphologically similar, which morphologically resemble each other. So he used the term morphospecies, and he gave morphospecies concept. So morphospecies concept states that the species can be differentiated from other species by their physical features and can be identified by their morphological attributes. Since members of a species can be identified by their essential features, that is specific characteristics, scientists also call this concept as essentialist species concept. In the beginning itself I said that this typological species concept is also known as essentialist species concept because certain essential features will be present in the members of a species. So by considering all these points, we conclude that this concept possesses a number of drawbacks. Several problems are there. Let us consider those problems one by one. But before that, in this diagram, what I want to show that there are, several diagrams, and each diagram, suppose it is a triangle, so this one is also a triangle, this one is a triangle. So those which are in this shape, they form one species. But if there is a small sized triangle, then that will become a different species. So large sized individuals and small sized individuals, they will belong to two different species. Likewise, there are circles, and this one is a large circle, this is a small circle. So it means these are two different species. Individuals could be in a square shape. Just for understanding, I have made these, squares. So these will belong to one species. But if there is a larger square, then this will be actually making a different species. So it means different shapes, they are represented as different species. So large individuals, they will form one species, small individuals, they will form another species. So several drawbacks were there, because presently you may find that members of a particular species which form a population, they may comprise large and small, every kind of individuals, or individuals varying in their sizes, but they all belong to a single species. But according to morphological concept, the members which are tall, which are large in size, they form one species, whereas individuals with the smaller size, they form a different species. So as I told, that a number of problems are there, and let us take those problems. First is a sexual dimorphism may cause problem. This is really a true fact, that there are several species of animals in which we find that males and female, they vary in their morphology. Like in case of peacock, we find that male peacock will be larger in size, it will have long feathers, particularly in the posterior side portion, and female is quite different. So there exists sexual dimorphism in peacock, and according to this typological species concept, male and female peacock will belong to different species. Likewise, we can consider the example of Bonelia. See, Bonelia is a marine worm, and in case of Bonelia, female is quite large in size. Its male becomes microscopic, very small in size, hardly 1 millimeter, and that also resides in the female genital tract of female, means it resides in the reproductive system of female. So according to this typological species concept, the male will be one species and female a different species, because morphologically they vary from each other. Several deep sea fishes are there in which female will be quite large in size, and their male will be small, and in several cases small sized male remain attached with the female's body. So if we follow this morphological species concept, we will have to consider the males and female as separate species. So this is a big problem. Then there are geographical variants, means geographical races are there, and such races may be showing variation in their morphological features, because they live in different ecological zones or geographical areas. They face varying environmental conditions. So physical differences or morphological differences is quite possible among them. So such variants will be different species according to this typological species concept. So this was also a problem. Then there are life stages, and different life stages may show morphological variations. We can take the example of this petromyzon or lamprey. What happens? Its larval form is emocyte. This emocyte larva, it lives larval form in this stage for about 3 to 7 years. So earlier it was considered as a separate genus, but then people realized that no, emocyte actually changes into this lamprey. So according to this typological species concept, Emocete will be one genus, and this lamprey or petromyzon will be another species or another genus. So the larval, in case of ambystoma, there is larval stage that is axolotl. When there is insufficient iodine, then this axolotl may retain maturity, it may reproduce, it may not metamorphose into adult form. So it shows neoteny and pedogenesis. So such forms, according to this typological concept, will be considered as separate species. Likewise, mutants. We know in case of Drosophila, hundreds of mutants are known. You have black-bodied Drosophila, you have white-eyed Drosophila. So in Drosophila melanogaster itself, so many mutants are there. So if gray-bodied individuals are there, they will be considered as one species. But if black-bodied or white-eyed flies are there, they will be considered as a different species. So these were the problems, that is, morphological differences do occur among the members of a population which belong to one species. So we cannot consider that morphological features can be used to identify a species. Means it could form one taxonomic feature, but not to identify a species. So that is why this concept was discarded. Presently, it is not accepted at all. The second concept which I talked is nominalistic species concept. See, this was actually given by Occam, a French biologist, and he had several followers. They believed that nature produces only individuals. Occam and his followers, French scientists, they believed that nature produces individuals and there is nothing like species. Only it is the human's creation, means we people have made a concept that some kind of species is there. Otherwise, nature produces only individuals and there is nothing like species. So this concept was totally discarded. It was not accepted. And the third one, which is very popular one and which is really accepted one, is biological species concept. This concept was mainly given by Meyer, Ernst Mayr, in 1942. He actually explained that species are groups of actually or potentially interbreeding populations which are reproductively isolated from other such groups. That is, there are members. Those members could interbreed among themselves and they can produce fertile offspring. And all those members will remain isolated from other such groups. They will be forming a species. So let us understand this aspect through this diagram. I have made a very simple diagram here in which these circles are there. So individuals which are shown in the circles, they belong to one species. They are genetically very same to each other and they can mate among them, they can produce fertile offspring and they are isolated from the other individuals which are shown in triangle. So in this particular circle, there are two different species, means members of two different species, and they may be belonging to a common ancestry, but they are reproductively isolated from each other. So those members which are similar in appearance, or they may not be similar in appearance, but all those which are capable to interbreed among themselves and produce fertile offspring, they form a species. So once you can also see these three aspects, that is, the biological species concept says that members of a species, they form a reproductive community. That is, members of a population like Drosophila melanogaster flies are there and they will form a population. They will identify each other as potential mate, means they will consider each other as mating partners. they will mate with each other and they will be able to produce their progeny. But if members of other species are there, like Drosophila ananesi or Drosophila pipecnata, if such members are also present in the surrounding, then there will not be mating between melanogaster and Drosophila ananesi, because they will not be considering them as potential mate. So mating will not be occurring between them, and that is why they maintain their identity. Then they form a genetic unit. Like once again, if I say that Drosophila melanogaster members, they are genetically very same. They form a closed, gene pool, and their genetic makeup will be very same. So members form a common gene pool, and they also form a ecological unit. That is, all those members will prefer to live in a ecological area which will be matching for them. They will be restricted in certain ecological area, and they will keep distance from members of other species. So these three characteristics will be there among them. Now, one fellow, that is John Ray, in 1682 emphasized the importance of reproductive continuity. That is, members of a species, they reproduce and continue their progeny. So he said that a species is a constant succession of similar individuals that can reproduce together. Means here also the reproduction was considered to be one of the major factors. A population biologist, rather to say population geneticist, Dobzhansky, he worked too much on Drosophila pseudo-obscura and published so many papers in the field of population genetics. What he said, he actually emphasized, he accepted the Mayer's view on species, but he said that members of different species, they are reproductively isolated from each other. So he mainly emphasized on reproductive isolation. What he said is species are systems of population. They form actually populations. The gene exchange between these systems is limited or prevented in nature by a reproductive isolating mechanism. See, this is an important aspect, because if you consider Drosophila melanogaster, just for example, I want to tell you that if you consider Drosophila melanogaster as one species, Drosophila bipecnata as a different species, if you keep members of these two species together in a single part, you will find that they will not be mating with each other. It means there exists a barrier, and that barrier is of reproduction. Means there may be several barriers which actually keep them reproductively isolated. So those barriers could be pre-mating or post-mating barriers. That is, ecological variations may be there between two species. One species becomes mature in one ecological conditions, other becomes reproductively mature in a different ecological condition, and that is why they are reproductively isolated. Then there may be behavioral isolation. In case of animals, the pheromones secreted by one species will not be accepted by the other, or the type of song which they produce, mating songs. So many codes of behavior which is shown between the species may be varying. Likewise, mechanical differences may be there. That is, the reproductive structures may be varying, and because of that, mechanical isolation would be existing in them. And even if mating occurs, then the zygote form may not be surviving. Even if mating occurs between two species, then the embryonic development may not be taking place, or there may be hybrid dysgenesis or hybrid breakdown. So all such things may be there because of this reproductive isolating mechanisms, and that is why a species maintain its identity, its individuality. Here also the same thing is shown, that is there are members of two different species, one shown in triangle, other in circle. They may be present in the same area, but they will be keeping distance because in the same ecological zone the type of food which they prefer will be varying, and that is why there will not be conflict between them. Now the fourth concept is evolutionary species concept, which was mainly given by Simpson in 1961. What Simpson realized that when we talk about biological species concept, it's okay, it's quite good to be considered, but phylogenetic or evolutionary aspects have not been considered in it. So he thought that he must accept biological species concept with the view that this phylogenetic aspect or evolutionary aspect should also be considered. So he actually advocated for evolutionary species concept, and he defined a species as an evolutionary species is a lineage, that is an ancestral descendant sequence of population evolving separately from others and with its own unitary evolutionary role and tendencies. This was the definition given by Simpson. Let us try to understand what does it mean. Suppose there is a species and this species is A. Now this species, in due course of time, it accumulated genetic variation and got changed into a different species B. So it is actually a species, new species can be only formed from the existing one. So you can say A was existing at one point of time and then it gave rise to B. Why A changed into B? Because in long course of time it accumulated so many mutations in it, so many changes in it, and as a result of it, it became a different species. Then this B changed into C, and the members of C got separated, and they got changed into three different species, that is E, D and F. So you can see that E, D and F, they had a common ancestor, that is C. Now suppose we are talking about D. Members of this D, they could be morphologically same, they will form one gene pool, they will be capable to interbreed among them, and they will be able to produce fertile offspring. So this biological concept says all these things, but Simpson said that okay, it is accepted. Only thing is that you consider about the evolutionary aspect. So this D is actually coming down, or it is descending down from its earlier ancestors, and then it is forming its own identity, and it is genetically different from other such groups like E and F, which also had same ancestor, but since they have got genetically differentiated into other species, so now there exists clear cut difference between E, D and F. And the same thing was advocated by Ville in 1978, describing that an species is an evolutionary species is a single lineage, as I showed A, B, C, D, like a single lineage of ancestral descendant populations which draws its identity from other such lineages and has its own evolutionary tendencies and historical fate. It means, see, this will be a species, it will be different from E and F, it will be reproductively isolated from it, but all these had common ancestors, and it will also be capable, according to Ville, it will also be capable to give rise to other species in future, because it will not remain like this. It will go on accumulating mutations. It will face different environmental conditions. As a result of that, and microevolutionary changes will be occurring in this species. We know that presently mutations, we know very well that mutation will occur in this species, that is unavoidable event, then it will experience selection, it will experience gene flow, that is flow of gene among the population, it will experience genetic drift. All these evolutionary forces will operate in it exactly the same way genetic forces will also be operating in this species. This will also experience all those evolutionary forces, and as a result of that they will be giving rise to different species in future also. So whatever kinds of species are existing today, they are not the end. They will also give rise to new species in ensuing future. But that future could be millions and millions years away.